is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random.
Exceptional Radio.
All right. It's July 25th, and sorry about that. We were experiencing some kind of technical difficulties, and not even sure what happened, but we're going to move on from that. As I was saying before, things are pretty nice here in the Midwest. It's nice and cool out, but it's still burning on the West Coast of the United States and Canada. And there's also flooding in China. And I'm really amused by this. There are agencies in the West, or reporters, or talking heads on the internet rather, who are saying that because of the flooding in China, it is demonstrating that Xi Jinping has not met the requirements for the mandate of heaven, that somehow controlling the water is the job of the ruler of China, and it's a reflection of their quality as a leader. And I said before, mandate of heaven means they're not going to kill him because he's doing a good job. It doesn't mean he can control water or the environment. He's a human being.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this really, I guess it's not really an increased or stepped up rhetoric, anti-China rhetoric lately, but it seems to be that the eye of Sauron itself is focusing more upon it, and I see it more in my feeds. And so it's interesting because I'm wondering, well, how did this happen? I haven't really been paying attention to China at all, but I've been paying attention to flooding. So I thought I was just like, man, the internet is just returning the strangest content to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird to see all this stuff in the sense of I understand there's a predisposition to want to be like, oh, it's the end of days and all this stuff. But, when there's 7 billion people, there's beyond biblical scale shit happening constantly. And I think it actually speaks to the persistence of life that, it's hard to even think on that scale, because then you have all these insects and small mammals and, all the life that exists that's not in our scope of what we like to.
Man, is biblical scale
acknowledge.
the largest scale that we can actually comprehend?
I don't even know
people.
if we can comprehend it. I don't even think it's. I think biblical is beyond comprehension, but just because there's a word attached to it, it starts to
materialize this nebulous concept. Right. Yeah, I think
it's the same thing with the Holocaust. It's people have an idea of the scale of atrocity, but it's just beyond human comprehension to actually fathom.
More Jews died during the Holocaust or during World War II during that period of time, and then there were people alive during biblical times.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of
the world during biblical times was maybe, and the concept of the world was maybe the size of the Middle East.
Yeah, I think it was 3 million people roughly or something that they estimate. So we're talking about 3 million people existing versus six plus million dying, then the ability to even comprehend the scale is thrown off by just like I said, our brains can't fathom that. It's beyond, and I don't know if they should be able to.
We're talking about 0.0004% of the population, of the current population. That's how many people were around during biblical times.
And even then, it's hard to fathom that, because we're talking about what.
I'm only doing 3 million divided by 7 billion. Yeah, it is hard to fathom I mean, how many people live in Indiana?
Oh, that's half the state of Indiana. It's like 6.7 million in the total state. So yeah, that's where
There are more
it's
people
hard.
around in Indiana now than there were during biblical times.
Yeah,
No
it's hard
wonder it
to
was so
imagine.
easy to organize people to do things.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And but even then, it's like people want to hold biblical uh, governance up on this pedestal because, yeah, it was easier because there was like less people in Indiana. So, yeah, all of the things that they were like talking about the rules and the regulations. And yeah, guess what? You can do that when there's 100,000 people, 200,000 people
In your biggest city, in your absolute biggest
Yeah.
city. Like, there weren't no million people cities back in biblical days.
Yeah.
They would have killed each other. Yeah.
And they did.
They
even
did.
on smaller scale. So I think that's kind of where I'm, the Good Samaritan story and the whole notion of why Jesus would need to exist anyway. It's like, yeah, these were small groups of horrible people that,
They had just emerged out of the era of barbarism. So,
yeah.
I mean, they were barbarians roaming the land, just killing each other rampantly for thousands and thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. By the time that we
And I don't even know if I buy that construct because that's where I'm like, I feel like that construct is a framing of a capitalist warring civilization that can't fathom existence outside of that paradigm. Because I'm like, I don't think our species could exist that long if we were constantly at war. That's not how war works. It's not, they're like, we've experienced a massive period of war in our lifetime, so we've gotten used to it. But that is not how empires or nation states thrive, by having constant war periods. And if anything, they need long periods of peace in order to establish large bodies of knowledge. And it's like, yeah, the whole notion of
oh no, you're absolutely right, because it's the Greek term that means somebody doesn't speak Greek and follow classic Greek customs. And then the Romans adapted to use the term towards tribal non-Romans, such as the Berbers, Germanics, Celts, Iberians, Thracians, Samaritans.
The very term barbaric comes from a place of xenophobia, a tribalist xenophobia that then has been internalized to represent how we assume
they used
all
it to describe the Turks during the Byzantines, and that's definitely pejorative. The Chinese used a variation of it to describe cultures from the outside land. Yeah. Incidentally, there's a group that of people referred to as barbarians called the Samaritans. I'm sure that's where Good Samaritan comes from.
Well, the Good Samaritan is the one that was not
a barbarian.
It's not just that. The whole notion was that Samaritans were known for having a city in which pirates or like thieves was set up like fake traps where it looks like somebody's broken down on the side of the road. So you're not supposed to stop to help them because it was like it's a trap. And that's where the whole notion of the Good Samaritan was the one that was willing to still help people even though there was a known
threat of sorts.
Threat of helping people. Like you're directly not supposed to help people because they use being vulnerable as a means to entrap people. So that's where vulnerability was actually a form of deceptive, like goading at that time, which is the 100% the story behind the Good Samaritan, and that's why that term exists. Not because Jesus told the story, it's because of that culture,
Yeah.
specifically having a focus of using fake vulnerability as a means of entrapping people. That's where that term comes from.
So the Samaritans were from the Iranian steppes, from eastern Iran or
Yep.
Persia, I guess at the time. It wouldn't even been Persia yet.
Mm-mm.
It was just the steppes of Samaritan steppes.
Yep.
Huh.
So, and this is all the stuff that, because Western Judeo-Christian history is meant to frame things a certain way. The whole notion of a good Samaritan is framed around Jesus and parables rather than the actual understanding of Samaritan culture, and the Samaritan region. In that, yeah, like a lot of people, like I said, you're not Christian, you're not like in that demographic that should know the understanding of that terminology, but the people who claim to be Christian or claim to understand like that part of history don't understand that terminology. So that's kind of where I mean, like yeah, you shouldn't know, like you shouldn't necessarily understand the origin of that term, but people who claim to be Christian should, and most of them actually don't, because it's intentionally obscuring the actual Samaritan culture in order to frame European Judeo-Christian historical lens as the way to see history. That's actively part of that process.
The parable
like-
of the Good Samaritan.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the whole notion of the parable usurps the idea of that culture even existing now in Judeo-Christian lore.
So about 20 years
mythos.
ago, there was this short documentary called Zeitgeist, and at the time I didn't realize what they were actually talking about. And the entire documentary is essentially a framing of Christianity having borrowed or directly taken stories from other religions, basically transplanting or renaming, Dionysus or Osiris, or insert any pre-existing religious figure. And at the time, I thought that the point of the documentary was about Christianity and religion, but I realized that it was more important that they were talking about stories and mythology that had reached the cultural zeitgeist, that had broken through to a level that everyone is aware of these things to some degree, but then breaking it down in terms of the only way that most people know about it, at least in this country, is through the lens of Christianity.
Yep.
But then when we go to other cultures, they're aware of these things because their education wasn't stripped of the details. And in a sense, we see that this this resistance to education in like critical race theory itself, because that's a pretty hot button topic right now, it seems. It's been happening the entire time. There's always some objection to the history and the accuracy of history being taught, or the accurate history being taught, and it has to be reframed for whatever our education system has become, or what these people want to shape our education system into becoming. I wonder how many more things have done this, like outside of religion. How many other mechanisms to teach people to think critically have been usurped by private interest, or just interests beyond those of the general public?
I think it's harder to do it in intersectional spaces, in that the more isolated a space becomes, the easier it becomes to create narratives that are one-sided. But that's where, China by design has been more intersectional as a nation, whereas the empire and the state have existed, but the culture is intersectional and distributed by design. So it's not like there's no real homogenous Chinese culture. Like it if anyone would like say there's a homogenous Chinese culture, that's because they're looking at like some really basic level. There's like, and it's the same thing with Africa. Like,
Yeah.
there's no homogenous African culture. There's no homogenous Indian culture. There's no homogenous Black American culture. But these things are made to seem as if there is like some underlying thread which all Chinese people or all Black people are attached to then make it easier to ostracize and
just along the eastern
otherize
seaboard of
those
China,
cultures.
there are like several distinct cultural regions. Like just from Beijing all the way down to Hong Kong, they're even Hong Kong and Guangzhou are not like the same culture. I mean, there's a large Han population, as I understand it, but
It's the same thing with Muslims, though. It's like
exactly.
it's easier to ostracize them and otherize them if you just lump them into one big group instead of like, oh, there's Sunni and Shia. They don't even agree amongst each other. So how are we supposed to say they have some unified like mandate against the West when they don't even have a unified mandate like on any front? So that's where I'm like, you have to homogenize these things in order to otherize them, because the more individuals you can see in these cultures, the less easy it is to lump them together into like a group to hate or a group to.
Can you homogenize?
blame.
You think you can homogenize a culture by taking away its culture?
That's exactly what they do, and then they appropriate it. Then they turn it into costumes to make it into jokes. That's exactly what they do, and then they sell it back to the people they took it from. That's how that process works.
Man, so the whole cosplay commando thing, where guys who did not serve in the military go out and buy all their tactical gear and vests
They
and all
even
that
do it
stuff.
to themselves.
Yeah.
They're not above doing it to themselves. It's like I was talking to one of our mutual friends, like, white people are gentrifying other white people now. Like that's happening. When you run out of minority neighborhoods and minority properties to gentrify, they start gentrifying other white people, because it's not about race. It's about extractable value. And this is where, when you have a culture that teaches people that extracting value at any cost is like fine, then you get slavery, then you get gentrification, and you get people justifying all that shit. So that's where I'm like, there is a culture of justifying extracting value by any means, and that is at the heart of American culture. So that's why discussing doing things without extracting value threatens that culture directly, and further decentralizing capital and value stores threatens that culture, because the crux of that is convincing people to sell out humanity in pursuit of individual accumulated unequal and exorbitant wealth that gives them the capacity to oppress others. And that's ultimately like the only reason we're still going down this path is because enough people are still in pursuit of individual power and individual control over capital in such a disproportionate amount that they are willing to sacrifice the very existence of our species by burning shit that destroys the planet. So this is where we know we're still in this paradigm of like extracting value being more important than the survival of our species. And we're slightly, I think the discussion is trying to shift towards existence being more important than value. But again, when we have the conversation and narrative being dictated by people who are dead set on accumulating disproportionate wealth because they believe that is the best path forward, I mean, then we're kind of stuck because people can't even think outside of that paradigm. It's like the even the fiction and science fiction has been designed in a way that prevents people from, like, all Western sci-fi is zero-sum games. And it's funny when you put it in a way of like, oh, from a game theoretical perspective, almost all Western, if not all Western sci-fi is zero-sum games, which is like completely counterintuitive when talking about envisioning the future. It's like we can't become a type 1 civilization in a zero-sum game. That's not how those numbers don't add up. So we never become a type 1 civilization in a zero-sum game. It has to be a positive sum game. And then when you examine it, it's like even in positive sum games, then the way that the capital is framed, it's almost as if it's still only best used when it decided how it's applied or deployed by a group of small people. Like, people always point, oh, Gene Roddenberry did a utopian vision. Well, let's break this down really quick. How utopian is Gene Roddenberry's vision of the universe? Lieutenant Tasha Yar has entered the chat. Because when I'm talking about Star Trek: The Next Generation, there is an entire storyline about how we got to the 23rd and 24th centuries, about what Earth was like, and then this brief period in which Earth was supposed to be utopian. The very first episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation is Q putting humanity on trial with Picard as the defendant. And this is where...
And attorney,
but this is where we're our species being put on trial for being as base and as savage as we were in the previous centuries that we claim to be now past. So in that very premise, obviously there is stories about Roddenberry's vision for the future being compromised, and in that he had a utopian vision, but it was even then compromised by the production and what happened off screen. But it's like, okay, well, let's go to the original series and not use what was a bastardized version. So you're telling me that in this, I guess, is the original series a supposed utopia yet?
No,
because I don't think so.
Oh no, not at all.
Yeah, that's not the utopia. So
in the original series,
only...
in the pilot for the original series, they were still a military vessel.
Yeah.
They were still facing tensions with, right into the Kirk era of original series after Pike. You know, they still have extreme tension with Klingons. They encounter the Romulans and they're like, oh shit. It's a Wild West situation in space.
Let's assume that we did achieve a utopia in the Roddenberry verse. It lasted for like 20 years then. Less than about 20, maybe 30, depending on where we frame it, because it's
according to the timelines that we've been given from the Next Generation, there's probably like 30 years before Picard where things are getting really good. And there might be a 30-year period of utopia during the Picard era, but there wasn't. Because we started encountering the Borg.
The Borg already throw off the utopia because they go back in time and fucking colonize Earth, and then.
But realistically, like once we get to the Discovery season 3 and they jump into the future 1,000 years or whatever, it's no longer utopia. It's fallen into. The Orion Syndicate pretty much runs the place. And we haven't really discovered or explored Orion Syndicate and they mention it in Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, and they're tough. But man, the Orion Syndicate, they run the place. 1,000 years after Picard, they run the galaxy. That's incredible.
All of these are still zero-sum games.
Yeah, there's no win-win situation in any of it.
Every last one is a zero-sum game. And that's where I'm looking at it. Like it's almost as if Western fiction and science fiction is incapable of existing without a zero sum game. Like you can't do a positive sum game in Western science fiction. It just doesn't work. People can't understand it. They can't fathom it. And that's where I'm looking at it. It's like, it's almost hard to not see that as being by design, where I'm like, this system is inherently dependent upon the notion of something being scarce. Scarcity must be present.
So is the main character even a protagonist if they don't go through some kind of change? If they don't grow or learn about something? I always thought that was like kind of hallmark of the protagonist, is that they're able to change throughout the story. But I think we've been getting a lot of stories lately where the protagonist, or the main star, the hero, as it were, is essentially a fixed, immutable superhero statue that doesn't do anything except do what they do.
Yep. Which is why then people get upset when you tell a different story than the Christopher Reeve Superman iteration. And that's where, again, it's like, yeah, our even our ability as Americans to appreciate creative endeavors has been stunted to the point that our fake characters are not allowed to grow.
And we're not talking about X-Men. We're not talking about the X-Men movies, because those were the first 3 or 4 were actually trash. And I'm including that first Logan movie. Yeah. That thing was trash too.
Horrible.
But, the Wolverine in Japan movie kind of made up for it. And then all of the new X-Men series that they redid that's been okay.
Yeah, First Class was awesome.
First Class was really good.
And then I rewatched Days of Future Past. It's like,
it's hard to watch.
It got a bad rap because of the pacing, I think.
Yeah,
and
I think
it like makes more sense now in the context of the MCU multiverse.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I hope they do something to actually retcon Days of Future Past, because it had good potential.
They didn't make the Sentinels big enough.
That's part of it for sure.
That was I thought that when they send in all the Nimrods in the beginning sequence, that was cool. That was really cool. I felt like they did that part really well, because that actually hurt when you watch certain characters check out real prematurely in very violent ways. But they did that part great. But then they showed us the OG Sentinels, and they're like fucking tiny.
Yeah, I think they were like 14 feet tall.
That's not tall enough.
To be like 30 feet tall.
Yeah, they've got to be imposing. They got to be a threat to Colossus.
Well, because then you have to be able to build Master Mold at like 100 feet or something, like 300 feet or something.
Colossus has to be able to throw Wolverine and knock off its head, and the head has to be sufficiently large. Otherwise, it's not as impressive. It's just a big robot thing. They got to be huge.
Yeah, I'm looking at one right now. Like, proportionate to Wolverine, they have to be at least 3 times the size of Wolverine. Like, and that's like, if he's between 4 and 6 feet tall, and I guess, okay, that works out for the 4 foot, but then they had Hugh Jackman, so it should have been at least like 18 to 20 foot.
Yeah. So
it still doesn't work, because you have a 6 foot Wolverine.
Even Nimrod's supposed to be bigger than a human. Like, they're all big. They're not. These are giant robots that are tough enough to take out mutants, like, and sometimes multiple mutants simultaneously. They've got to be like the most imposing threat around. And if that doesn't happen, then it's just a big robot.
Yeah, and I think that's part of where, they failed on the Sentinel front, but then also the story was just wonky.
Yeah.
And those kinds of stories where they negate themselves, make the audience feel like they wasted their time.
Yeah.
So there had to be some thread, like the fact that Wolverine remembered it. They needed to make that more important, but obviously that universe was kind of what's the word? It felt like it had it's not just that it had a closed end. So if they don't connect that universe to the MCU currently, then there's not a whole lot of places they could have gone with it because it was bound to end anyway. So that's where I'm like, the way that they have Phoenix still alive at the end of the Dark Phoenix movie, and Logan having remembered the Days of Future Past previous story, like previous timeline. If they bring that into the MCU, then it'll make it all worthwhile. But that's where, again, it's like those stories become useless to the audience if they don't go anywhere further.
Man, I'd like to see a Destroyer versus Nimrod battle.
Or, we haven't seen any Adaptoids yet, right?
No.
I don't think so.
I'd like to see that too. There's so many vicious machines out there in the Marvel universe that I'd love to see square off, and it'll probably never happen because they're generally working towards the same end goal. Man, that would be a good one though. Wasn't there a Striker robot also? I think there was a Striker robot.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there was, and he was
there's like a robot everything at some point.
I'm not sure if that's like being creative or taking the easy route. What do we do this season, guys? I don't know. Let's just turn the bad guy from last season into a robot and make him more powerful.
Well, okay. Have you seen?
I mean, that's what happened with Anakin. They turned him into cyborg Anakin.
Yeah. Have you seen the Masters of the Universe? Because there's like a robot He-Man briefly in there.
Now I'm gonna have to check this out. I've been avoiding it because every time I see it like pop up in my feed, it's like, really? Again? We're gonna go through this again? Okay, whatever. Actually, I take that back. About 20 years ago, there was a reboot of He-Man, and I was listening to it. I decided to watch an episode of it because it was on like Cartoon Network, and it was pretty late. It was like 10 or 11 o'clock, and I had this just overpowered subwoofer for the apartment I was living in, and we turned it up, and holy crap, the earth started shaking. It had one of the most incredible sword and sandal battle soundtracks that I think I've ever heard. And
I remember there was a lot of sword flipping on that reboot.
Oh yeah, and lots of whooshes and well, I think they were smart enough to recognize the sheer mass of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe and their foes. These guys are huge. They're like 12 feet tall. They weigh 800 pounds apiece, at least, and that's on the light end. So I think they were aware of that, or at least my brain says, oh yeah, they're aware of that, because there's a documentary about the toys that we had growing up in the 80s, and a lot of them, of course, were just the cartoons were designed to sell toys. Transformers may have had a thing in Japan, but when they brought it to America, it was all about selling toys. Same thing with He-Man and G.I. Joe and all this stuff. But there's this person they interview during the He-Man episode, and he's talking about how these guys are like 12 feet tall. They weigh close to 1,000 pounds. They wouldn't actually be able to walk on normal ground because the size of their feet, the pounds per square inch applied to their feet would definitely break the ground beneath them. Battles would destroy the earth. And so it's kind of one of those things like, man, like Goku can smash planets. How much mass does he generate? If these dudes who are 12 feet tall and weigh 1,000 pounds can break the earth just by walking on it.
Oh yeah, and that's like part of it is that's actively part of the Dragon Ball mythos is that they increase their gravity as individuals, which is why they train in like 900 times gravity or something.
In the hyperbaric time chamber.
I think they had a gravity chamber in there, but the biggest time they were doing that is when Goku was traveling to Frieza's planet, or I don't know if I forget if it was planet Vegeta or.
Well, I think
Planet Vegeta was where the Saiyans are from.
Yeah.
So it was Frieza's planet.
I think in Dragon Ball Super, during a period of time when Trunks had returned from the past that failed, or the future that had failed, he and Vegeta train in the chamber and break it, I believe. Like, they turn it up so high that it collapses.
Yeah, I think that's oh yeah, because I think that's when Vegeta unlocked his like Super Saiyan God or something level,
Yeah.
because they had that whole thing where the Saiyans are supposed to get stronger by getting near death, and that's where they kind of got away from that mythos a little bit, but then they started to bring it back.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's reflected in the Tournament of Champions when practically every time Goku's about to die, he reaches a new power level.
right.
I mean,
Also helps the toys.
yeah, because now you got to get a Goku with not only black and gold hair, but now you got to get the one with the blue hair and the red hair and the what's the other one? The white hair.
Yeah,
like you got to get all of it.
They made the best story arcs for video games, and that's where I first got familiar with Dragon Ball from the video game, and from it was in like 96 maybe. It was a Super Famicom version where they had Future Trunks on there, and Piccolo, I think Super Saiyan level 2. But the video game was fucking awesome, where you had people shooting Kamehamehas and shit. Like, you never seen this in a video game before. So in the 90s, having Dragon Ball Z video game on the emulator, and like, man, it was such a fucking like the types of visuals you would get from the Dragon Ball video game was just something you just didn't get from any American video game. So that's kind of where I was so into the visuals that then, I started watching or getting the Funimation VHSs when they released them. So I got really into Dragon Ball Z. And that's kind of where that whole approach to storytelling, it's like, it's a soap opera, but people will not understand that it is a soap opera, and then they get too wrapped up in certain things about it.
I always thought it was amusing that they would take 4 episodes at 60 minutes of powering up and like flying at someone just to deliver one punch. But it makes sense if their gravity is so intense that they're actually slowing down space-time or altering the fabric of space-time.
Yeah,
and so if they've altered the curvature of space-time, and we're the casual observer from a different reality, of course 30 seconds to us gets stretched out into, 30 seconds then gets stretched out into 30 to 60 minutes for us. That makes perfect sense.
Yep.
It's the only way that we could watch a planet really be destroyed is through some kind of gravitational lens that allows us to appreciate, that is creating an enhanced curvature of space-time that allows us to appreciate it over a much a more elongated period of time.
Well, because then they show it, but by pulling back to the other people's perspective, and then when we're not in the fight, all the other people can see sometimes is just like flashes.
Yep.
And they pull back to show like what's happening in real time is way different than the time scale that we're being shown in the drawn out version. So it's like, they very well represent that time dilation shift visually. But if you're not understanding what's happening, then it's going to be, why is this fight 3 hours long? It's like, no, it's not. It's not actually 3 hours long.
It's only like 3 minutes long.
Yeah.
It just takes us 3 hours to watch all the detail.
In our time.
Yeah. The longest punch, it takes like an hour. But man, when it lands, even when it lands, you want to be able to see it in all its glory. Like we want to appreciate when Goku punches Lord Frieza in the face hard enough that not only does his jaw deform a little bit as he absorbs it, but we want to see that shockwave that destabilizes all of the land around them and sends rocks hurtling up, hundreds of feet into the sky.
Well, and especially after he learned instant transmission, he's basically teleporting in between moves. So it's
Yeah.
like, we see it on screen, but if this was actually in real time, what you're telling me you're gonna be able to see this dude teleporting around, fucking at like faster than light? Yeah, no, that's not how that shit works.
even Piccolo and Gohan admit during his fight with Beerus, the first fight, is like they can't even keep up with it. They can't, it's happening too fast. And that was before he was a Super Saiyan God. So, man, obviously instant transmission enables faster than light travel. But holy crap.
So he can travel 22.3 trillion miles per hour, or 33,000 times the speed of light.
So that makes the Dragon Ball universe even cooler, because they found a way to go faster than the speed of light, and it doesn't destroy
faster.
the fabric of space-time, and it doesn't undermine all of existence or all of physics. I love stories like this. I've mentioned it before. There's a science fiction universe that I'm a fan of. It's this Tales of Known Space by Larry Nevin, and the hallmark of this is the story of Ringworld. And in this story, there's a group of aliens that find humans amusing because we created a rule that prevents us from traveling faster than light.
Yeah.
So
but that okay. So then the place I found that is they compared, is Goku faster than the Flash? Well, in one story, apparently, Wally West took a bunch of people. He had to move a bunch of people to save them, and they did the math, and he was traveling 2.5 quintillion miles per hour, or roughly 3.7 trillion times the speed of light. So Wally West, fastest thing in science fiction ever so far. So then the Wally West traveled 111 million times faster than Goku.
Thank you, DC, for breaking the laws of physics and making the story work.
Yeah.
Take that, Marvel fans. You don't have a character fast enough to do that shit. They've got to use a machine, and they've got to extract like the lifeblood out of some other mutant to do it. Bastards.
Because then Superboy Prime was like bench pressing planets and shit for fun for his workout.
Hold on, guys. I'm going to change your orbit by a few feet. Hold on, guys. I'm going to put it back. What an asshole. Oh, but the force required to move a planet just a few feet without destroying it. We don't have anything even... I don't think it's... I can't even imagine anything powerful enough to actually do that without destroying the Earth. Or a planet in general.
Oh, it was... he built a machine to work out, and he was bench pressing effectively 5.9 sextillion metric tons, which is like, planetary scale, the Earth's weight for 5 days straight.
For fun. Just because.
Yeah, and he says after doing that for 5 days, it was the first time he remembered sweating. So you have these characters written which are called OP, or overpowered.
Oh, yeah.
They pop through ever so often, and then they'll be taken out for whatever reason. I mean, because they throw off the capacity to tell a good story.
Yeah.
And often the only way to to get rid of an overpowered hero is to bring in an overpowered villain.
Yeah. Yeah. I always liked Proteus, Mutant X. He's Moira McTaggart's son. He's got like mind-bending powers, and he's like I think he's the only character that has made Wolverine pee his pants. Proteus is like a super powerful telepathic mutant who can change the fabric of people's reality in a sense. He's a incredibly powerful character that has like probably the stupidest stories, because it's always like, how do we calm this kid down and knock him out so he won't destroy things? But he's also a really incredible character because it can, he showed Wolverine what it means to be afraid of things. And Wolverine's not supposed to be afraid of anything.
Oh, they did a variation on this character for Legion.
Oh, yeah.
Legion is basically taking David's story and telling it. If you have you seen Legion?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. It's basically Proteus without calling him Proteus.
Yeah.
And then they, I won't ruin that. Yeah. No spoiler, because if anybody hasn't seen it yet, it's actually worth watching.
I mean, I can't think of very many, short of like Phoenix or Apocalypse or the Professor. There aren't really many people that can take on like Legion or Proteus even. Like I think that's a realm of villain character development that strikes at like our worst fears. Somebody who can just tap into just dial straight into what makes people break. And I think in a sense, these type of stories they're fascinating because they attempt to break down things like fear or just, irrational fears, especially, but they attempt to address these things in a way that allows us to stop and pause, and they emphasize thinking about solutions. But Legion's, I think the Legion TV show is actually really good, because the first few episodes I was watching it, I couldn't tell what was going on other than, this guy's in an asylum, or not an asylum, he's in a psychiatric ward, and he's obviously, not right, but how much of this stuff is happening in his head and how much of this stuff is happening in the story universe? And that was fascinating. Because unlike Lost, where it's just like, what the hell's going on now? I mean, I felt that too, but I didn't feel like I was actually being led around. I felt like there was more opportunity to actually explore that story. So, no, I definitely need to catch up with it.
Oh, did you not finish it?
No, I didn't. At the end of last season, I just kind of waited and I kind of forgot. So,
oh my God, they ended it so well. I'm glad I didn't spoil it.
Yeah, man.
It's such a good ending for that specific show. In that, oh man, that story was a good exploration of human nature, and the way that they ended it, I think, fit the narrative appropriately, and the way that they ended it also, I think, opens like. Have you seen any Jermaine Clement episodes yet?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Jermaine Clement is in there and he's fucking amazing as usual, but the storyline goes in a way different direction once his character comes in. And that's like, have you seen, I'm trying to figure out, like, have you seen The Shadow King yet?
I think I can't say for certain. I can't remember where I stopped watching last season.
Yeah,
previous season.
If you know.
I mean, I know who Shadow King is, but yeah, I don't think I've seen that.
I was gonna say, if he had become important in the storyline. So that's where I'm getting.
Yeah, I don't think I've gotten to that part of the story yet.
I think there's a point where did you ever watch Lost?
Of course, I watched Lost.
So there's a point where you're watching it and you're like, how much of this is real?
Yeah.
And then it goes sideways, and then you're like in a different timeline by season 3, and you're like, what the fuck? Where did this show but it's cool. So that's kind of where Legion does the same thing, where you like start off where you're like, is this reality or what? And then it veers off the track in such a hard left where you're like, I don't know how the fuck we got here, but this is cool. Yeah, and that's kind of where, again, it's definitely not your average Marvel story in the best possible way. But I do think that the way the pacing was like presented, I could see how people drop off. I don't blame people for dropping off before it goes off the rails, because you're like, okay, this is a cool story, bro. You know, it's all right.
Well, we've talked about the complexities of watching a show piecemeal as they air versus waiting for the end of the season. And you know, it's one of those shows that I kind of decided I needed to wait for it to have more. I want to watch it, but it's also one of those things, like, there's so much to it that's not linear that you can't just wait for it. You got to have it all at once. I think there are a lot of stories like that lately, especially the superhero stories where, you know, they stretch it out because they need time to develop a character or develop the plots enough so that it makes sense. And I'm grateful that they do that. But there are also times when I feel like, you know, I'd be willing to sit down for a 6-hour long movie if they could just deliver it all at once. And so in a sense, I do enjoy, like, Loki. I just rewatched the entire thing the other night, and it was fantastic. And it was like watching a really long Marvel movie, except it was a little bit less cut and dry, and it was a little darker, and everyone's pretty much a villain in it. But I really enjoy it. And so, you know, they did a similar format with Winter Soldier, or not Winter Soldier, Falcon and Winter Soldier. And it was basically like a two Marvel movies stretched out over an episodes. And I like that.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned, like, the format change moving to because everyone has a big ass screen, the letterbox screen in their home now, that there's more pressure on TV series to push the envelope towards that kind of storytelling and making use of that real estate, because we don't need to see a 3-foot tall head on a screen. We can see the rest of their body. We can see the room they're in and some other activities in the background. And
like the moon crashing into Lamentus, like you might as well have had that on, you know, IMAX, the way that they constructed that, like that cinematography. It was fucking amazing. But it was for TV, and they used, like, when Sylvie and Loki are sitting on Lamentus watching the fucking moon crash into the planet, like, come on, there is not much else that could beat that visually. Yeah. And this is where I'm saying, like,
well, that's some blockbuster full screen sized action.
100%. And you didn't get that on TV before.
No.
Nothing even close. Like, I dare somebody to find a TV visual that comes even remotely close to the cinematography on that one scene. Well, I will put that scene up against all of TV history.
The big battle at the end of season 2 of Discovery is probably the same size of scale, like planet moon size scale, but nothing is singularly as large of an event. There are quite a few spacecraft, large full-size spacecraft, that get destroyed, and each one of those probably represents the economy of an entire planet of modern day economics. Like, you know, if we're thinking the GDP of the Earth probably represents what one spacecraft is in 23rd century Star Trek. I'm making a big assumption there because, you know, resource acquisition is not the same in our universe versus theirs. But that's the only thing that I can think of in modern TV that comes close to that scale. Because, I mean, all of our stories on planets take place on, you know, small swaths of land. But when you're in a spaceship that can fly, I mean, full impulse power is just shy of light speed. So if they can achieve full impulse power within a matter of seconds, or, you know, they can travel really fast. I don't think that it's actually I don't think there's very much dialogue anywhere on the internet about how fast the ships in Star Trek really are, that they can accelerate to, sub light speed, just below light speed in a matter of seconds without killing all the occupants of their ships.
It's inertial dampeners.
Yeah.
Those things sound like a joke, but it's those fucking inertial dampeners, man.
Man, if they don't exist, everyone.
Yep. Splat.
Like anytime that, like when the ships shake and people get thrown around, no inertial dampers, they'd be like tossed around like a bug inside of a jar if you shook it really hard.
Yep, 100%. And it sounds, whenever the term gets brought up, it sounds like a joke, but then you imagine what that would look like if the starship went from sitting still to impulse power or impulse speed instantly, and it's like, yep, splat, everybody in the ship, splat.
Or stabilizing a warp bubble so that people don't get ripped apart at the atomic level.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these are things that, they've answered the question, like, how do they do it? But I don't think that these things are appreciated on a real broad level. I really don't, because there are a lot of.
It's flooding in London now.
Really? Wait.
Yeah.
But they have a giant river that runs through London.
The subway is underwater.
I guess it is underground.
Yeah, these moon wobbles, man. Woo! Humans are not ready.
It's clearly it's Xi Jinping's fault for not controlling the weather. He forgot to pay the goddess of the moon and the rabbit in the moon their yearly I don't know. I don't even know. He didn't light up the path to Vega so that she could see her husband or something like that. This moon wobble is just beginning. We got 10 years until it peaks in 2030, 9 years. And then we got another 10 years afterwards until it's scheduled to subside. We got 20 years of this, and it's only ramping up. I wonder how much more of our aging infrastructure is going to reveal itself in the coming months. I mean, if it's pulling on water, it's pulling on the oil and in the earth too. It's pulling on the magma. It's pulling on our iron core.
How many volcanic eruptions are going to happen? Like big ass eruptions, because that shit's coming.
Well, for quite a while now, I've thought of oil as our planet's temperature regulation system. Much like in an engine, oil circulates to.
That's what it seems like, right? It seems like.
Yeah, I mean, and we use water to sort of keep an engine cool. But the more we pump the stuff out of the earth, the nastier it becomes. Like in Oklahoma, when they first started doing the fracking, all of a sudden there were earthquakes in Oklahoma, in a place that had been geologically stable for a pretty considerable amount of time. And
imagine that oil serves a purpose being there.
Yeah,
we're not supposed to take it out. It didn't just accumulate for no reason.
It's a buffer. It protects us from our own planet.
Oh my God. What if the way you're talking, it's like the fucking fluid between joints, and the earth has joints that move, and we're taking out, like the bell just went off. The fucking fluid between the earth's joints is what we're removing. So then it's like, oh yeah, guess what? Now the earth's patella is knocking against its fucking femur because our dumbasses took out the fluid that kept that shit floating.
Holy cow. Okay, so I just opened up that link you sent me. Olympic Park, not only is it flooding, but there's like current in there.
Yep. It's moving. That shit just came out of the earth.
The water level is like between knee and waist height, it looks like. And I'm judging based upon height relative to the banisters and to these hand sanitizer stations. Man.
Well, and it's weird how Western media just hasn't started covering it yet.
Here's a picture or a video of people trying to ford some flooded highway, and there's a car that's submerged. And wow, these people are
This shit
bold.
is happening too quick for Western media to keep up with because they have to like let people reset mentally before they gaslight them again.
Well, how are they going to blame this on a Chinese lab? That's
They got their weather making machines, weather modification machines in China.
well, they was it in
100% Chinese government.
oh, where was it? They made it rain.
Dubai.
Yeah, they made it rain in
Last year.
Dubai.
They've been doing that for years.
Yeah, well, they ionized the atmosphere with drones, right? And charged the atmosphere and made it start doing big droplets. That's what I thought was amusing. Big droplets, because otherwise it evaporates before it makes it to the surface.
Yeah. Like aluminum, silver, some shit they put in there.
Silver nitrate.
Silver nitrate, yeah.
Historically or traditionally, they used a rocket to shoot it up into the sky, and then they explode it like a giant firework. And then through electrochemical process involving light and heat, it starts raining. There are, I guess, barges that are I remember watching videos of barges that had all these little rocket packs all over them. Basically, the largest fireworks display ever type situation. And these are tested over open water in the ocean, and they would fire these things, and then next thing you know, a cloud appears, and bada bing, bada boom, there is a giant ass rain cloud over the ocean.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the NASA's cloud making machine.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's like the way that
it looks like industrial pollution at its finest,
right.
But it's really not. It's like the opposite.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like the way that this science has been attempted, it leans into the space in which the conspiracy theorists thrive, and that's kind of why I think you then end up getting these like Americans that believe some dumbass shit because things like this exist. So then it's like, well, yeah, they can shoot lightning bolts from satellites, and they can play God, and it's like the mythologies from the ancient man were actually from aliens that did this, and now we got the technology and these disconnected notions of how like cloud seeding undermines Indian historical
Man, I always wonder about people who think that we can just create lightning, because it requires the same amount of electricity that we find in a lightning bolt to create a lightning bolt. Now, there are lightning research facilities, and they shoot a rocket that has a piece of wire on it up into the clouds so that they can draw lightning down to the surface. And I guess that's kind of like creating a lightning bolt, but not really, because they have to shoot a rocket into an existing storm front that has lightning activity. So there's got to be electrical activity. So a lot of that comes from our ionosphere, but some of it's also the result of like just the forces working within our planet interacting with the ionosphere. And some of it's the result of industrial activity, but not as much as we think it is. I don't think that cloud machine can compete with an actual, like a mountain and a water supply and the sun. I think a mountain and the sun can do more to create clouds than any box with a bunch of chemicals.
But too many Americans think that the box that NASA made is gonna overcome all of the other things.
We need one of those in like every 50 miles. To create enough clouds to be meaningful. And where are we going to get all the water from? That water has to come from somewhere.
Or all the materials and all the people to build them. There's all these things about the way that our science fiction in this country specifically has made it seem like those things can easily happen where we are so far actually away from it. And this is where it's like creating an illusion of the capacity for money to solve problems in the sense of like, oh yeah, if it needs to be done, you can just buy it. Like science can be bought.
I can see creating a cloud like that at, say, 20 to 40,000 feet being meaningful, but not on the ground. It'll just trap a bunch of heat on the ground and then disperse on the ground like a fog.
Yeah, it's not going to work the way that we need it to work.
I mean, it's nice, but maybe they need to build a 30,000 foot tall smokestack so they can pump it up into the atmosphere where it's meaningful. Maybe they'll figure out how to do that. Surely NASA can miniaturize it into the size of a 747 and just fly around and spit out a cloud instead of condensation trails. Oh, that would be so cool. A 747 cloud maker. Yeah, they'll call it the cloud maker. It's the cloud maker 797.
I'm pretty sure a company's been doing that one for years too. Like they cloud seed. I think that's the main way they had been doing it in Dubai.
Yeah,
is buy a plane that like sprays it directly, because that's like the easiest way. In fact, like an aerosolized like distribution of the particles directly into the atmosphere. But it was easier to do that from a plane than it was to build something on the ground that did that into the atmosphere.
So one of my lifelong goals is to either find a company to do this for me, or eventually, if I have to do it myself, I'll figure out how to do it myself. But when I die, I want to be cremated, and then I want to seed a cloud. Like, I want to be mixed in with the silver nitrate, and I want to get tossed up in there. And
it's silver iodide.
Silver iodide. Okay. And I want to be mixed with the silver iodide, and I want to get shot up into the upper atmosphere, and I want to seed a cloud. That's what I want. So, internet, get to it. Somebody out there, figure out how to do this and make it legal, so that I don't have to like go to some other country to have this done. And let's make this happen, because I think that there is a strong enough. What's the word? Well, it hasn't even been seeded. This idea is still in the development stage, obviously.
Here's one of the issues with that. There might become an outbreak of mad cow disease, and potentially, then by proxy, like a zombie outbreak.
If I'm incinerated?
If all of the particles don't get destroyed, because this is where
the prions and stuff like that.
Well, the human proteins are not meant to be consumed by other humans. So if like part of your DNA like drifts into some field, and eventually like pieces of TN are in a cornfield, and then people start eating like corn that was laced with TN's DNA, that is like how mad cow starts.
Yeah, they can also like irradiate my ashes with ionizing radiation, and like that's what I mean. There's a way to do this so that it doesn't expose other humans to prions, things that we can't just cook off. But fortunately, ionizing radiation is a thing, and it causes all organic tissue to disintegrate, especially organic material. So there's a way to do this. There's a way for me to see the cloud someday. It's going to happen. I just got to make sure it's done right.
Make sure you don't cause a zombie outbreak. That's all.
But if I actually am the source of a zombie outbreak after I die, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I wouldn't complain because I'd be dead. Oh man, wouldn't that be the sticker of it all? Like, zombie outbreak occurs, localized zombie outbreaks occur after humans crash into the Earth after failed recreational space flights. They mostly burn up upon reentry, but then their genetic materials spread out through the atmosphere, and we have, I'll call it space disease or something. Also,
the way they made mad cow a euphemism as if it wasn't cannibal cow disease. These cows are mad. I don't know what's going on with them. They're eating other cows. It's driving them crazy.
Yeah, last week Susie
because they're
ate
not
old
supposed
Betsy.
to eat other cows.
Yeah.
They're being fed other cows because our system's fucked. Then that shit happened, and people didn't understand what was happening to their meat supply. Like when you have Americans eating cows that are being fed other cows and not understanding what's happening there
Yeah.
as to why the cows are then going insane and then not understanding like maybe we should do something about this food supply situation. Cows cannot escape eating others' cows, and that's not a good thing. If we got to a point where the food supply is so cannibalized inherently that pigs are eating pigs, cows are eating cows, chickens are eating chickens, something's wrong. And it's like not enough Americans understood, I think, what was actually happening with Mad Cow to start to say, oh, wait, there's an efficiency problem here.
Holy crap. So it takes, if you have intact skin and you are exposed to prion risk materials like mad cow brain or something like that, it takes a 10% solution of bleach, washing or submersion for 2 to 3 minutes, followed by extensive washing with water.
Jesus Christ.
So prions are distorted proteins that cause all manner of horrible shit to happen. There are human prions, there are animal prions. They've been around. They were discovered, 30 years ago, and we're only now at the point where we can recognize like the kind of problems they're really causing and what to do about it. And that's I think that's the scary part, is that no matter how we're just finding more and more nasty shit, and we're starting to understand it, but it's like we're at this place where science is being questioned, and can't trust the internet because it's just a giant podium for any idea to be spread, and some of them are clearly entertainment, like what we do, and then there's some that are very they're kind of innocuous. They want to act as some kind of authority, and that's fine. I like authorities when they are deserving of that kind of title, but man, at some point, I hope that hand washing becomes like the law of the land, and not just like everyone does it because they are compelled to for their own personal health and safety, but because it's just part of the culture.
Do you remember when hand sanitizer was posh and in vogue to have like a thing of hand sanitizer all time? And then we swung back in the opposite direction, and people were like, I need to be dirty to be healthy. I need to get as much bacteria as possible. I'm not going to shower for 5 days. How about that? No showers. That makes me healthier. And it was like America is so pendulous. It can't just be normal. It just like refuses to do anything in moderation. And it's so funny, like they're even down to the marketing like slogans antagonizing Americans into not being moderate. No one can eat just one. Like it's like daring you to do something in moderation. Like, oh, you want to try to moderate your diet? You want to eat just one potato chip and not eat a handful? I dare you. You can't do it. You can't eat just one.
So
that's like
I'm gonna make a very broad generalization. People that can only eat one potato chip, those are the same people who eat popsicles and chew on ice. There's something about them that's a little off. Like I love sugar, and I love popsicles, but man, sometimes that stuff is like colder than cold.
Yeah. I mean, we have scientific proof that most humans don't have more self-control than a chimpanzee. So I'm not surprised that, most humans can't just eat one chip.
Chimpanzees because we have can no fly drones too.
Yeah. And they've
can drive cars and
seen in coordinated war with gorillas now. chimpanzees and gorillas have gone to war.
Oh,
and
it's
observed,
Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
basically. And the chimps apparently aren't to be underestimated.
Dude, chimpanzees are incredible. I mean, apes in general are incredible, but chimpanzees especially, because they live in trees and sometimes fall out of trees and get up like, oh, I just fell over, like a human being tripping over a stick in the woods and getting up and like, oh, that sucked. Well, chimps fall out of trees like 20 feet, land on their face, get up, shake it off, and then climb right back up. They're just incredibly strong. And they can learn to roller skate. I know humans who can't roller skate. Some of them have been trained.
They went to space before we did, right? Technically.
Yeah, they did. You know, some of them can fly planes. Well, in the past, some of them did have flown planes. Some of them have driven vehicles. So, you know, humans flying a plane or driving a car isn't actually that impressive. You know, monkeys can do that. Chimpanzees can do that. Coco, the gorilla, she learned like more sign language than almost practically every human on Earth knows. So we shouldn't be too disparaging of our simian brethren, because we're not that far off from them. Also, if anyone is stupid enough to try and get in a fight with the chimpanzee, like, they should prepare to have their arms like removed at the socket, because those things are so strong for their size.
Yeah, technically, a chimp beat human into space by 3 months. The first chimp in space was Ham, and the first human in space was Yuri Gagarin. Ham was January 31st, 1961, and Yuri was April 12th, 1961. So technically, chimps beat us to space. How about that? How about that?
Yeah, let it be known that the chimpanzee space program is way more sophisticated than we ever realized, or was published in the media. Oh man.
And then they're like, "Oh, Alan Shepard on May 5th." Well, Alan still didn't beat Ham, so him neither. Shout out to Ham, unwilling sacrifice, because humans were cold ass motherfuckers that would send chimpanzees to space.
No, the Russians sent dogs, and Laika perished in space
with open cockpits and shit.
Yeah,
fucking crazy.
They were like, crazy. I mean, they were basically just strapping a chair onto the nose of a rocket just to see what would happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like the early, the early Mercury capsules, like, they didn't have any radiation shielding. They could only be up there for like, a few minutes before it was guaranteed they were going to get cancer. With all this talk of going to the moon and setting up facilities on the moon, I haven't read a fucking thing about radiation shielding or protecting people from radiation or preventing facilities from becoming irradiated. Like,
imagine if Jeff Bezos gets cancer next year,
because they didn't have any shielding on their dick-shaped rocket.
Yeah, they just went up and got a bunch of fucking radiation, just being
rich,
fucking space tourists. And they're like, actually, both of your testicles are gonna fall off. This shit would be hilarious. No, I mean, I'm sure it's not gonna happen, because apparently this timeline is like weird, and it's giving billionaires disproportionate influence. But
it's all it's going to take is the first batch of Amazon on the moon employees getting cancer at the same time. Everyone who goes to the moon is going to get sick at the same time. Everyone who goes in at the same batch, like the group that lands in batch A, they're all going to get cancer pretty much at the same time. And batch B is going to get it like 3 months later, because that's when they landed on the moon. And batch B is going to get 3 months after that, because they're all going to go up in even intervals. And occasionally they'll have to replace somebody because they'll fall and hurt themselves, or they might get sick. And they'll get sent home, but they're still going to get cancer at the same rate that everyone else in that batch got it.
You can't keep the ones here from dying.
Yeah,
They're not gonna
there's
have.
no talk of radiation shielding. I think that would be like the most important thing. We know that it's out there. We know that that solar radiation destroys our tissue. Why aren't they talking about the new shielding technology that, I mean, other than that it doesn't exist, and they're relying on just, blocking it out of the way with a piece of ceramic and minimizing exposure. I bet there's going to be some really cool technology that comes out of it, like Amazon moon water, and Amazon moon water, made from the finest water sources on the moon, which will probably include moon workers' urine as it's reclaimed regularly. Speaking of moon urine, and just the idea of peeing in space, and the fact that everyone's in a sealed container, so it's basically a submarine, except smaller, and there are fewer people, but everything is being recycled, like everything. So if they have an environment that has any kind of humidity at all, some of that is comprised of water they brought with them, and some of it's comprised of water that was extracted from pee, and maybe some poo. This is getting a little dark, but I don't know about you. I don't know about anyone actually who wants to be trapped in an airtight, pressurized container with artificial humidity supplied in part by urine, even if it's filtered or cleaned out. Like, I just can't imagine that being like, this is what we signed up for. Like, I just don't think that it's. I'm just curious how far they've actually thought all this through, because it doesn't seem like they're talking about things that should be talked about.
Well, and I think again, there's been the way this has been framed is as if because these people are billionaires, they can just like buy their way out of problems, and like, like radiation, we don't have to talk about it because they're billionaires. They'll figure it out. They'll buy the solution.
They'll just pay for cancer treatment.
Yeah. So, yeah, there is a lot of shit that's being overlooked, which is also why somebody who worked for or whose partner works for mission control for the International Space Station made a thread about all the reasons why the billionaires are never actually going to be in space and they're stuck down here with the rest of us. And it's like the amount of people it took to get them into lower Earth orbit for like a minute is just unsustainable for them to actually, be up there shitting in vacuum tubes, fucking eating dehydrated food. Space is not fun. Like, there's no replicators yet. They're not up there eating fucking replicated steaks on the International Space Station. They're eating dry, dehydrated ass fucking food that, like, I mean, in some cases they have the packets and it's not all dehydrated, but a lot of times it is, and they have to rehydrate it, and it's rehydrated sometimes using their own piss. So yeah, it's like, at a certain point, the way that existence in space has been conflated with what we see on like Star Trek versus like it's not glamorous.
If anything, it's a lose-lose situation.
Well, I was gonna say it's not glamorous to think about astronauts wearing diapers.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to think about that. And like, yeah, guess what? When you shit in no gravity, you have to have something like pulling that away. So yeah, they're shitting into like vacuum tubes a lot of times because everything doesn't work the same way up there.
So the astronaut diaper, otherwise known as the MAG, the maximum absorbency garment, I think these are actually, you can buy these.
Live like an astronaut.
See. Maximum absorbency garment. Yeah, you can buy these things. Oh man, I shouldn't have searched for this. Now I'm going to get ads for adult diapers.
Oh shit.
Okay, gotta clear the cache. Gotta
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the dangers.
that's exactly how that works.
The dangers of searching for things on the internet.
Oh my god.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last hour. Clear everything. Before it syncs up and replicates to my other computers.
Make sure your phone wasn't picking up on it.
Oh no.
Which is funny, it's like the people that are all worried about microchipping and shit have inundated their entire lives with digitization and tracking and cookies and all kinds of metric like analysis that goes to someone else. So it's like, why would anybody need to microchip somebody when they already put all their data out? It's so absurd that this notion of like, oh, they want to microchip us with this vaccine. Motherfucker, they already have all of your bio data because you put it out there. You're on Facebook putting out all of your personal information constantly,
willingly
telling
and freely.
everyone when you're not at home, when you're out somewhere, when your house is not being watched. You're putting all this shit out there. And it's I doubt the people who are listening to these people is not our audience. The American
who is concerned with being
wing.
tracked.
Yeah, it's 100% the right wing too, and it's like, yeah, I've never met like a leftist who has these same concerns because it's like, yeah,
I'm glad that you mentioned this because I'm sure you've read about the Freedom Phone, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The most spyware laden device ever created outside of China, probably still manufactured in China. But all the software on it is like at the design of the people who are marketing it. It's the
way John McAfee was exploiting people who would buy this type of shit.
Like
and
this is
believed it.
This is the MAGA phone. This is the Make America Great and Gain Your Freedom phone, but somehow it became this extra tracking device. Ugh. Yeah, it's created by Eric Feynman, the self-proclaimed youngest Bitcoin millionaire, and somehow he was Time Magazine's most influential teen of 2014. And what does he do with his gains? He goes and develops a phone that is more hardcore about tracking and listening to its users than any other phone.
Oh my god. Yeah. Yeah, that's what happens when you idolize little 19-year-olds.
So this is funny. It's for sale for $500 in America. But you can also buy the exact same phone on AliExpress for $120.
It's like the Soldier Boy. What was it when he tried to make the Game Boy shit, whatever?
Oh, yeah.
Soldier Boy PlayStation or whatever. I don't even remember what the name of it was, but yeah, it's giving off those vibes.
Man, they're just... What is it? Oh, it looks like a PlayStation Vita. But I think at some point, people who have gained some kind of celebrity status should probably stay in their lane. Like, I get it. Will.i.am wants to own a car company, and he bought failing DeLorean and reissued DeLoreans and developed a bunch of clothes and other technology. And some of that stuff looks pretty cool, but some of it also looks like it's meant to be a movie prop. And I don't think that anyone in the music industry should be trying to develop a clone of a handheld video game console. That just seems like, I don't know. Maybe if Soulja Boy's music was like MC Chris and just rapped about like video games all the time, that would make sense. Maybe, probably not. Coming next fall, the PlayStation NERD, sponsored by Pharrell.
Jeez. Yeah, so I was gonna say I was not aware that Will.i.am tried to do a car company, but what?
Yeah, Will.i.am bought DeLorean, man. I mean, that's cool. I'm glad that he decided to do something that he was really into. That's awesome. I applaud anyone for leveraging their resources to do the things that they're really into. That's badass. But man, a car company, a failing car company, no single human has enough cachet to take a failing car company, not a developing car company, and then slap another inventor's name on it and turn it into an electric car company. I'm talking about an actual car company that was still, the name and designs, and then just reissue them. And the jury is still out on how long Tesla is going to last, or if they're going to succeed, or if they're going to give us new battery technology so we don't have to destroy the earth to finance cars. I mean, we're still doing the whole like government subsidies for that stuff. Yeah, federal tax credit for all electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles. Taxpayers are still paying for people who can afford to buy electric cars to buy electric cars.
Huh. Yeah, that whole DeLorean thing was sketch. That's like the definition of sketch. I see like he built a custom DeLorean, but I don't know if he ever actually bought the company. And his custom DeLorean got impounded because he was driving it with no tags. He partnered with Chrysler to start a company.
Well, maybe that's what it was.
I Am Auto. And it seemed like the company was like a car customization company that didn't really take off.
Oh, well, that's what it was then.
Yeah, and it's weird. Like they'll do these periods of car customization being the thing, but it's really just ways for people to flex. So I got a bunch of money, because most of the time, like, you can't actually do it yourself.
Yeah.
In the same way that like you and Guinness built that.
The rat rod.
Yeah, it's like when these people are customizing, they're not doing that. They're paying somebody else to do it, which then it just becomes this like, oh, this custom car was built by West Coast Customs or something. It's like, you're just,
yeah,
it's just a different way like of wearing jewelry, basically.
Yeah. I mean, a buddy of mine, he used to work for a custom car shop, and they were building the car used or driven by the Joker in what was that terrible Suicide Squad?
Suicide Squad.
Yeah. So he was driving around in a modified Infiniti G37, I think, that they made look like a Lamborghini. It was actually a design called the Vader. And so, my buddy worked for this company. They were making a bunch of them, and I'm pretty sure a bunch of them got destroyed during filming because they were trying to drive the car around like it was some badass thing. But they basically took a fancy sports car and changed the body and changed the driving position and did a few other things, and it looks cool as hell. I mean, it looks really good. But they're starting with an existing car platform. So it's just a body kit at that point, a complex body kit.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of these are
Which,
like that.
you know, when I was a kid, I remember thinking like, oh, why don't I just get a body kit? And it's like, then you learn like, oh, it's just the body.
Yeah.
You don't actually get the performance with the body,
My
and
my
you understand.
my favorite was the Ferrari Aero, the Fieros with
Yeah,
Ferrari and Lamborghini body kits.
yeah, those were the rage for a while.
Those are
'Cause
always
it's
cool
like,
looking.
oh, yeah, you want a $10,000 Ferrari?
A Ferrari Aero.
Get what you pay for.
Well, they look
Might
cool. Some of them look cool.
might
That's
explode
it though.
though.
It might explode. Might catch on fire. Going around a corner too fast.
Yeah, so yeah, they look great.
Yeah,
This
that's
is definitely a $10,000 car.
yeah. There are a bunch of weird body kits to make small cars look like super fancy sports cars, and if they're done right, it's hard to tell. Like if there's some really believable kits out there, but I think that's just like a super novelty level of car interest.
I'm looking at some of these kits, and yeah, it looks like Magnum PI could be driving this. But then you probably get in there, and it's like, I don't know.
So I've been in the passenger seat of a Ferrari 308 GTB, like the Magnum PI car, and it's tiny. And I've also been inside a Fiero, and I have a hard time believing that any kind of interior will have the fit and finish of the Ferrari, because even a 30 close to 40-year-old Ferrari still was made to the standards of a Ferrari, and the expectations were absolutely met. It was like a finely crafted leather glove on the inside. And despite its age, it was, it just screamed quality, which is really surreal because, it's just a car, it's just a sports car, but it's not. It's a very well-made piece of machinery. And that's crazy. Like, there's some really old cars out there that were made really well, and they show. And there are a lot of really expensive cars out there, even today, like brand new ones. And when you see them, it's like, I wonder how long it's going to take for this to start falling apart. And for a while, I used to think that style of construction was like part of an older era of auto manufacturing, but it turns out that it just depends on the company that's making it and the kind of standards that they are trying to uphold. Like there are still brand new cars that break down within the first couple of years of ownership. Mm-hmm. Looking straight at Fiat. Actually, a couple of people that I know have had Fiat or Fiat engined vehicles. One of them was in a Jeep, and the engines or the transmissions all failed well before the warranty period ended. Fortunately. It always makes me wonder, though, like how can a car company that makes products that have notorious reputations for failure manage to survive? Like it just doesn't make any sense. Maybe they're easier to maintain in their home country, in the domestic market. It's just easier to maintain. Maybe
I'm sure.
Maybe like a BMW in Germany is like maintaining a Ford in the United States.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So maybe a Fiat in Italy is
that's
like.
why you see them as the fucking taxis over there.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, you go to Germany and your taxi might be a Mercedes. It's probably going to be a Mercedes. In fact.
Man, why can't we have freaking Mercedes taxis? That'd be so nice. It'd be so nice if
it's like way different.
they can manufacture a Mercedes in Germany and make it reasonably affordable for people in Germany to operate and maintain, and then they can manufacture a Mercedes in America, but then they charge the same price that they would had they remained importing it into the United States from Germany. That's just like punishing the market.
Yep. Which, again, this is where like what is it, Lexus?
Only
Lexus
exists in America or North America.
right. Yeah, because then you go to China and it's like the
Toyota.
fucking Toyota Camry is the same shit,
Yeah.
and it's like the same quality as the Lexus.
Yeah. Same as with Acura, it only exists in North America. And once you leave North America, I think once you go into Mexico, it's there. The cars that would have been Acuras are just Hondas. That always kind of irked me. That it's like, why don't they just make a higher end Toyota in the United States? Does Toyota not extend enough quality with its reputation to garner those kinds of prices for a fully loaded Camry? Do they have to call it a GS 300 or something like that? Or whatever they call it now. I don't even know what they call their cars anymore.
Branding is a hell of a drug, man.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, I know that there's a difference between like a Cadillac and a Chevrolet because they go to great lengths to make tiny differences into big differences.
Yep.
But I also know that there's not much difference between a Silverado and a Chevy Silverado and a GMC Sierra, other than one comes with more options right off the bat. But they can both be optioned out to the same trim level. And I think actually the GMC truck, the Sierra, fully trimmed out, is still more expensive than the identical Chevy Silverado fully trimmed out too, which is always kind of strange.
Yep, because you're paying for that logo.
Yep.
And the fact that people are willing to pay for it is why they keep doing it. It's really crazy.
Well, for a long time, if you wanted, for a long time, there was a distinct difference between Volkswagen and Audi. But in the last, 10, 15 years, that line has been blurred so much that, top of the line Golf is just as fast as the top of the line S3. A Passat now and a A4 are pretty much identical vehicles, other than badging and a few interior trim pieces that are different. But the performance difference is no longer a thing even. I guess if you want a really big car, you'll still have to get an Audi, because I don't think Volkswagen makes a car that's as big as an A8. But not many companies make big cars like that anymore. It's just like
no. I mean, it's ecologically unsound, and I think they've come to the point where they're like, yeah, we can't be making the expeditions and the navigators, and that. Like, yeah, there's still SUVs, but they just can't be making these ridiculously large vehicles with ridiculously poor gas efficiency or fuel efficiency anymore. That was a very, I guess, 100-year window.
well,
but yeah, we can't be.
Isn't it interesting though how like the things that are doing this, normal people can't afford these things. Poor people can't afford giant super gas guzzlers. They end up buying an old ass gas guzzler that's big enough to haul their family around. I wonder how much, there's actually an image circulating on our images of the day, and it shows the relative cost or percentage of CO2 emissions by world population, and essentially 49% of our CO2 emissions by world population are contributed by the richest 10%.
Yep.
And so this is obviously this includes corporations and governments, but it also includes some individuals.
People taking private jets and shit.
Yeah. Private jets.
100%. Somebody taking a private jet is going to use or contribute more to the carbon footprint than I can do in 5 years.
I wonder how many plane flights. Yeah. Because private jets
a plane flight, that's thousands of dollars worth of gasoline alone.
For one person.
Yeah.
Because it's normally split up amongst 100 passengers or so. How many people do a plane hold? 737.
The price to fill a private jet can go from $2,000 to $30,000 to fill it.
There are 162 seats on a 2-class layout 737-800. So 162 people. How much did you say it costs to fill up a tank?
Between 2,000 and 30,000.
So 30,000
or
like
over 30,000, because then it's like $500 per hour to nearly $2,000 per hour for the fuel.
Holy
of
crap.
operation. Yeah, it's at least 500 because we're talking about jet fuel. We're not talking about fucking 93 octane. Like we're actually talking about jet fuel now. And it obviously has to be at a higher refining quality.
So if it costs $2,000 to fly for an hour and you've got 150 people, that's only $13 per person for the fuel.
That's not a private jet.
Nope, that's a passenger plane.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's like
so
those get fueled, or the fuel for those is different.
Yeah, I know. So but even still, like, $13 for one person versus $2,000.
That's not, that math isn't gonna work. The thing that's like the whole reason it's like 30,000 is because it's still small. When we're talking about like something that's carrying 150, like 30,000 is going to be the lower end, and it's going to be probably like 60,000, maybe 70,000 to fill that tank. Like, because that's where I mean, like a private jet is like for 10 people at most.
Yeah,
you're talking about like 15 times that weight capacity, so that carries into the fuel.
Okay, so at $70,000. That's $466 for 150. That's and then it's still less than 2,000. Yeah, man, the whole concept of a private jet at this point is just kind of sickening to me. Like, I get it. People have money; they don't want to fly with other people, and they can afford to do it. Good for them. But just the resources involved. Like every plane requires a ground crew. Every airport requires people to sit there and watch the terminal so that nothing goes wrong. Or sorry, the tower. They have to have and every airport has ground crews.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a huge industry.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be airlines buying in bulk, so they're probably buying by the barrel anyway. So it's like, this is gonna be like the way we pay for it at the pump. They probably have their own refineries, to cut costs. So that's kind of where, like, this whole thing is. The airline industry is also the oil refinery industry by proxy. Because everything's so intertwined now. I mean, it always was, but even more so now.
Emirates.
Yeah. Yep. But that's where, like, I don't know if have you ever flown through Oman?
No, I've not, but UAE Oil.
Their airport. Woo!
I bet it's nice.
Yeah, it is. Good Lord.
I mean,
good Lord.
Just looking at UAE Oil and then like Emirates Air, and these things are definitely.
I've only been at the airport, but that's where I'm like, holy shit! Like, there's different scales, and like, god damn, you see, that's like the most concentrated wealth I've ever seen at any airport. And it's like you just see it. It's not like people, because everybody's damn near wearing the same clothes, but you can see like the wealth in like the little accents and the jewelry that people have, where you're like, oh my god, that's like $100,000 watch, or you don't see that shit everywhere. Like, the displays at the airport there were like, you'd have fun looking at like a display, whereas like in America, if you see somebody trying to sell you some shit, you're like, how the fuck can I get away from this person? Like, it's just such a different. Yeah, I saw like
Emirates airline wrote off $600 million worth of fuel that it bought but didn't use because of travel lockdowns last year. And but it doesn't matter because they're directly tied to the rising costs of fuel anyways. So, or when fuel goes back up, then they benefit even when other people have to pay more.
Mm-hmm.
What a crazy deal. Hey, we own the oil. Let's have an airline.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like when your country socializes the oil profits, not everybody, a lot of people are way more wealthy than if it's just in the hands of a very small few. Because it's like, even there, it's obviously not the entire population benefiting in the same way as like the royal families, but there is a lot more distributed wealth than there is here to the scale, because that's where it's like, yeah, there's a reason it's just everywhere you look, instead of like, you go to the richest places in America and there's still poverty like visible, but that's just like, yeah, they're able to either hide it well enough or ship it outside their city limits so you don't see it directly in the same way that we are not able to in this country. Like, not that we should be trying to do that. I'm saying our concentrations of wealth are manifested in different ways, and they are visualized differently. So this is definitely not aggrandizing that approach, but it's just more so like the way that oil control has then shifted how we even discuss oligarchies or plutocracies. Man, it's really crazy to see the petrodollar having started to take over the narrative and controlling how the world works, but still it's still trying to use nationalism as like the lens through which things are happening, as if it's not actually corporatocracies and by proxy
Kleptocracy?
Well, I mean, it's not kleptocracy when they sell it.
Oh yeah.
Like, kleptocracy is like it's a misuse of the word, even in that, like, the way that the pseudo left in America is incapable of assessing the situation with nuance. It's like anything that happens is like, oh, the right wing stole it. Like, no, our government sold that shit. Guess what? It's a Democratic government that's hoarding vaccines right now. It's not a Republican government. It's a Democratic government that's directly causing people worldwide to fucking die because they're hoarding vaccines for people who don't want them. So this is where it's not a kleptocracy. This is exactly how this fucking government's meant to work. It's sold to the highest bidder. It's a corporatocracy.
Yeah,
it's a corporatocracy. 100%.
Going back as far as February of this year, there are articles from EDUs and orgs that are talking exactly about what you're saying about U.S. vaccine hoarding. If globalhealth.duke.edu, if rich countries don't share their vaccines, the pandemic will continue or will drag on. Like,
yep. So we hoarded a bunch of vaccines that right wingers did not take, and then they all went fucking bad. And we let a bunch of people die because our Democratic leadership decided to play politics with these fucking vaccines instead of sharing them with the world. So this is where I'm like, yeah, we have to be realistic about how we let our quote unquote left, because we don't really have a left, but the people who are putting themselves up as left wingers, we have to be very careful about how much rhetoric they steal from actual leftists to then use that to perpetuate the status quo, because Guantanamo Bay is still fucking open. We are on the second Democratic president who ran on social justice, and Guantanamo Bay is still fucking open. So I don't know how we reconcile those things without, like, we have to do like a hard reset on politics if we're actually ever going to solve problems. Politics don't do shit.
In February, the current administration declared its intention to shut down the facility before the end of the administration.
Yep, still fucking open.
So,
in other words,
another 3 years of
at
least.
At least, maybe another 8 if they win. So,
Ugh.
At least, and that's just pushing it off to say, oh yeah, we're gonna shut it. We're gonna delay the closing again. Motherfucking 2008 Obama ran on closing that bitch. It's still fucking open. So fuck politics, fuck the left, fuck the right. All that shit is fucking, this shit in America is not doing anything except spinning its wheels and patting itself on the back when they win elections.
Well,
get out of that shit.
As of early May, there were still 22,500 unaccompanied children who are still being detained.
No cages have been closed. So, yep, we're still keeping kids in cages.
Well, what are they going to do with all them cages?
We paid for them cages. We got to use them.
Fucking sunk cost fallacies.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.